it beats some sort of baseline other investment. All right, we're going to make this more complicated. What if there are more payouts into the future? What if there are multiple payouts at multiple time periods? We can discount each individual payout in the future. We'll discount it back by this discounting term, dividing by this discounting term, 1 plus r to the t. So each of any individual future value we can discount back. So the forestry example in the book that says after 15 years we could get $1,000 out of it, but that's going to reduce the final value to $4,000. So now we have two payouts. At 15 years we get $1,000. At 30 years we get $4,000. So the present value is $1,000 discounted by this term 1.05 to the 15th. Right? So this is the discount term for 15 years. And we'll get $4,000 discounted by 1.05 to the 30th. We'll add those two up, and we'll get the net present value of the project is now $1,407. So the net present value went up a whole bunch, $300 more. And what that's going to show in this example is that it's worth a whole bunch in present value and discounting to move some of the benefits earlier. The benefits way out at 30 years are going to get smaller and smaller. The more that we can get some of the benefits earlier, the higher the value is going to be. So a little bit of money at 15 years is really going to affect the return of the project. Having to wait 30 years for the whole payout is really going to diminish the size in the discounted to the present day. So there's a couple formulas in the book that you'll need to learn. These two are in the problem set and could be, fair game for a final. I will give these to you if they're on a final, but thinking about how to, work with them. An annuity or an annual value. An annuity is an annual payment, a stream of payments. Let's say we will get a payment every year for a specific number of years. It's actually a kind of financial investment. If you go online and type in annuity, there's lots of people selling annuities. They sell them to older people. When you're retired, you take your retirement account, you put it into what's called annuity, and they're going to pay you, a fixed lump sum every year that you're alive. And insurance companies do it because they have the reverse side. They need a bunch of money, and they're going to invest it and make a payment out to you. It's like a term of insurance payment. But basically, an annuity is a way for us to think about future values. If we're going to say we're going to get a whole bunch of future values. So if it is for a fixed number of years, we have this formula. This discounting term minus 1 over the interest rate times the discounting term times the annual value. And the annual value would be this annual payment. Say a project is going to pay out, say we're going to preserve a hiking area, and it's going to give $5,000 in benefits every year for 30 years. Say we want to, the example here is say we're going to insulate our homes, and it's going to save us $500 on our heating bill every year. So this is like every year for a certain number of years payment. If you say that it's going to pay you every year forever, for infinity, then this term, these terms are going to drop out, and it's just going to be the annual value divided by r. And if you want to see how that derives and how the math for that works, it's in the textbook. But if you just say we're going to get a payment for insulating our homes of a certain reduction in our heating bill forever, then you can use this much simpler formula. So the energy conservation example just puts a couple of numbers for us to try and calculate this with. We say there's a project that's going to cost $4,000 to insulate your home. And it's going to save $744 per year in reducing bills. So this isn't as big of a deal in California, but it's a really big deal in the rest of the country where people own older homes. They spend a ton. Like a heating bill, if you live in the Northeast or the Midwest, can be huge. Thousands of dollars you spend on gas or oil each year. But people are buying their gas and oil each year, and they're not looking at a stream over time. It's hard to get sometimes people to look at a stream over time. This is really a big policy issue, though. This was a huge part of Obama's stimulus spending. So there was, what could the federal government spend a lot of money on now that will provide investment benefits into the future? That was a question of how to respond to this recession. What could the federal government just release a chunk of money on that was ready to go now? And one of the things they picked for the stimulus spending was energy efficiency. Energy efficiency for schools, government buildings, all sorts of infrastructure. Like schools are old and crumbly, and we'll put new windows on them, and that school will save money on their gas bill forever forward. The other thing to pay attention to is when we go into talking about carbon and evaluating different options for reducing carbon in our society, these always show up as low-cost options. They're always the thing to do first is energy efficiency and conservation. The cheapest thing to do for a low-carbon future is consume less than we do now. So we'll talk about why this is so. So we have a whole bunch of subsidies for homeowners. This is from a power utility in Michigan where lots of people are spending a whole lot of money, and this year was a very long winter, and more money came out of people's pockets than they expected. And these are hundreds of little things, right? Insulate your ducts, insulate up here, insulate your windows, change your air conditioner, change the insulation in your attic. So there's a whole bunch of different projects people can do. And people don't get, it's not sexy. It's not sexy. It's not like putting solar panels on your roof or something. It's like, a bunch of these little projects and little benefits. But calculated over all of society, the amount of natural gas, the amount of carbon that we would emit it would reduce it a lot. And this is an interesting thing. So this is a power company doing this. The power companies are selling people gas. So they're getting rebates. So how can they conserve on their bills? What are the rebates going through people's power bills themselves? If you're doing your taxes, I don't know if you guys have to do your own taxes. This is actually a whole bunch of stuff. Like if you're going, I do the tax software, there's a whole bunch of questions on these. Did you do these energy conservation? There's a whole bunch of things on the tax form. Different tax credits. You can get $500, $200 for Windows, and you can get a credit for 10% of these. So this is a little arcane. It's like 10%, maximum $200. It doesn't seem like that much money. That's going to steer people a lot, but it's in there. It's still in our tax code. The stimulus was like 09, 10, 11, but this has been extended. So this is still in the taxes that we have to do this week. Okay, going back to the calculations. So we start out with it's going to cost $4,000 to insulate your home, and it's going to save you $744 per year. So the annual value. This is our annual value. This is the present value of the cost. And our interest rate, we'll just keep using 5%. So if we're going to say we're going to get this benefit and reduce bills for our home forever, we'll use the simple formula, the annual value, $755 divided by 5% forever. And this will be the present value of that stream. The net present value would be the present value of these benefits. So this number here, present value of benefits and reduced costs. And the cost to us to do it right now, the $4,000. And so the net present value of doing this would be $10,000. Go for it, definitely. Hard to convince people, but totally worth it, right? You're going to, over the life of your home is probably not infinity, but let's approximate it with infinity. It's going to be definitely worth it. So then you have the question, people don't stay in their homes forever. People move every 5 years. I don't know if I'm going to stay here. Should I put in new windows? Because what if we move? So here we have this more complicated formula for the present value of the benefits with this interest rate and time multiplier. So the annual value is still $744, but we have a more complicated multiplier that we're going to multiply times our annual benefits. And so now we're going to come up with the present value of benefits for 5 years is $3,221. Right? So the present value of the benefits, $3,221 minus the project cost of $4,047 is going to give us a negative amount. So if we're only looking at a 5-year time horizon, it's not going to pay off. Our net present value is negative at 5%. In the home sale question, the true question is, when you sell the home, will you get at least $826 in added value when you sell the home? Right? So really, if you would say the net present value is negative, but if you could at least get $800 more in the sale price of your home, then it's worth doing. Then the net present value is positive. So a whole bunch of questions are about which interest rate we should be using. And this is a big question in public policy. You know, if you're in a private company, you're using the interest rate that you can get, the interest rate that's available to you. But if you're a government, or if you're just doing project planning, where you're not actually borrowing the money, you're just trying to discount future streams to now, which interest rate should you be using? Should you be using the private sector interest rate or not? So the interest rate is set by a whole bunch of different things. There's a whole bunch of people saving money. There's a whole bunch of people borrowing money. They're meeting in markets in the middle. There's a whole bunch of financial intermediaries. There's tons of information that you can see people buying and selling mortgages, mortgage-backed securities. The government's borrowing trillions of dollars. The rate that the government's paying to borrow money drastically affects what private sector pays to borrow money. So there's this price, a supply and demand, that's allocating money between the future and the current time period. People are making supply curves and demand curves on the future and supply curves and demand curves from now, and we have markets clearing between time periods. If we think of our supply and demand curves that we started out with, we can think about supply and demand curves between time periods. We have our personal, as a consumer, we have our own impatience rate, right? So as consumers, we have some internal choices that we're making that are what things are worth to us. Is it worth borrowing money to consume, right? Like credit card interest rates, 22%. I can get 0% for putting money in the bank, and somebody's charging 22% on consumer credit cards. What are student loan rates? 6, something like that, 6%. So we have 6%. It's worth borrowing money to finance my education because my earning stream from year 5 to year 30 will be higher, right? I can make a payout at 6%. But everyone will have their own personal rate of impatience, how much they want to bring consumption into the current time period. You know, my mortgage on my house is like 4.5%, something like that. So there's indifference curves. Remember we did indifference curves trading off donuts and coffee or two different goods. There's indifference curves between period 1 consumption and period 2 consumption. And remember, there wasn't really a thing that was the indifference curve. We just drew it through those points. Beans and rice or whatever, beans and corn. We just got the bundle and drew a line through there. So every consumer is going to have different values. How much they just going to live for now, save for the future, balance those two. Investments that we make that are going to pay benefit streams in the future are called capital goods. So this is a really big one in analyzing power, utilities. These are things that we buy now. We're going to buy a generating station. We're going to buy solar for the roof of our house. We're going to say this is a capital good that we'll purchase now and will provide a stream of services in the future. Businesses are going to buy machinery, factories, whether they're going to build a nuclear plant, whether they're going to build a collecting solar plant in the desert, whether they're going to put photovoltaics on the roof of Walmart. They're investing in something because it's going to give them a stream into the future. Consumers are investing in goods that also are providing streams over time. So you can put photovoltaics on your house, you can buy more efficient appliances. For me, as a consumer, I don't consume a lot of electricity, and it's actually worth more to consume, to buy more efficient appliances than it is to actually buy photovoltaics. It's better for my vanity because it's cool to have solar panels on the roof of my house, but in terms of ranking things by their net present value and their returns, it's actually worth it to buy like a more efficient refrigerator and a more efficient washing machine and things like that that are just going to lower my payments over time. Less and less electricity consumed. So a big term here that's going to rank these projects is our return on investment. So that's our present value of this future stream of investments minus the annual costs. And annual cost is going to come up in terms of annual cost will have a component that we might need to pay each year, and we might have a capital component, right? So we have some investment cost, and we have some interest cost on whether to purchase an investment or to purchase a capital good. We, for a lot of cases, want to take the cost of things and spread them out over time. If we're going to build a power plant, it's one thing we're basically doing in the class is we're ranking what it costs to build different kinds of power plants. Ones that emit a lot of carbon and ones that emit no carbon, right? So they have this investment cost and this interest cost, and we want to bring those down into an annualized stream that we could reflect in the price of electricity. So we have student loans, as I already said, to finance investment and education. We want to think what's that, what we can think our future stream of benefits for getting a better job, but there's going to be some annual cost that we're going to net out for each year that we're paying back the student loans. Some monthly that we're going to pay, we're going to make more monthly income, or we're going to have some monthly payment back on the interest of our loans. So we already did the example for the homeowner buying insulation services for their house. Future stream of benefits, and maybe they are going to borrow the money and have an annual set of costs. Now we'll go through a few examples looking at different interest rates. So we can vary the interest rates and look at how that's going to affect different aspects of it. So if we change it to, this is back to the home insulation example, 7 years. So if we change it to 7 years, we'll get a number of $4,300. So remember, at 5 years, it didn't work. At 7 years, it does work, right? So we're just changing the numbers a little bit and give us different examples. At 7 years, it has a positive return, positive net present value. But if we change that to a 10% interest rate at 7 years, all of a sudden, it has a negative net present value. So of the parts of this term that we're increasing and deflating the future of the annuity value by, we can change the interest rate, and we can change the term. So interest rate's in here, and the term of how far we're going to the future is in here. So they're each going to have different effects on whether projects are going to have a positive net present value. We have to be able to think about this with a little bit of intuition, right? So if the interest rate goes up to 10%, the present value of all those future payments, like reduced price of, on our gas bill, gets less, right? The present value of the future with a higher interest rate is smaller. It's also that the opportunity cost, what else we could have done with the money, is higher. So we could have put the money to invest in something else at 10%. At 5%, it was a good investment. At 10%, it's not as good an investment because we could be potentially making 10% elsewhere. So there's a graph in the book that we can talk about looking at this annualized cost, $744 per year for 7 years. And at what interest, so this is us thinking, at what interest rate would the present value, would ranking the net present value make it a worthwhile investment? So on this graph, this is interest rates here going up. We start with 5%, we just talked about 10%, talked about 7%, and we did some calculations for what the present value would be. We did 5%, 7%, and 10%, and they just went through and made a curve of all of those different points. So at what interest rate does it make sense for us to do the project? So at 6.735%, this present value of the future stream of benefits would equal the present value of the costs, right? At lower interest rates than this crossover point, the net present value is positive, and at higher interest rates, it's not worth doing the project. The net present value is negative. We can sum this up in some ways as the internal rate of return of the project. So we've looked at varying the interest rate and looked at varying time, but if we have the present value of the investment, if we have the future value of the benefit stream, we can actually solve for the rate of return that makes sense for the project. Or we can solve for the rate of return that the project is actually yielding, right? We can solve for R. If we leave R as available, we can solve for R. We'll call that the internal rate of return, and we can compare that to other R. We'll have an R for the project, and we'll wonder if this is bigger, better than less than the other R, the other interest rates that we could get, the market or the R alternative. For in a business, we could say, what are the internal rate of returns of different investments we could make? If we're looking at this from this homeowner perspective, we would say, is this internal rate of return of doing this better than other investments that we could be making? Better than keeping it in the bank or investing in something else? If we're a policymaker, we would say, what's the internal rate of return of this project compared to other possible expenditures of public money? So we have different policy options. We're going to rank the internal rate of return of the different options, and we're going to take the one with the highest internal rate of return. So we can look at the present value of a $1,000 payment into the future and see how much this is going to change by different interest rates. The higher the interest rate we have, the lower the present value of a future payout. So this is, if we got $1,000 in year 30, if our interest rate was 8%, it would be worth just over $100 in current year present value, $1,000 in 30 years. If it was 5%, it would be something around $200. If it was 2%, it would be worth between $500 and $600. So the higher the interest rate, the more impatient we are. The more we would just rather have the money now. The lower the interest rate, the more worthwhile a long-term investment with long-term payouts is worth. Sometimes this is a little complicated when we look at borrowing versus savings. So if we're thinking about the homeowner in the insulation case, the homeowner needs to finance this $4,000 they're going to pay on insulation. So they could look at between whether they pay $4,000 out of the money that they have or they save that. They put that in an investment account with some other return. You could, as a homeowner, you could also say, well, I could take out a home equity loan. I could borrow the money to pay for this improvement to my house. And they would compare that to the cost of borrowing money. And as I said, these are different, right? This is how much money could I get elsewhere if I parked it in a bank or a mutual fund. This is how much will I have to pay the bank to borrow that money. So that's going to affect what we're looking at, the return. In between these two, cost of borrowing, cost of saving, there's banks, there's financial intermediaries, there's financial markets that are matching up people between the future and the current day. And they're making money. And they're not just making money, they're making profits, right? So there's always going to be this difference between cost of borrowing and cost of savings, right? So if I put money in a savings account, it's getting 0%. If I take money on a credit card, it's 22%. That's a huge difference, right? But they're a lot closer for other things. They get closer and closer for other things. But there's which rate of return and how you think about it is really going to drive whether you think something's worth doing. Now we can get back to the macro when we think about inflation. So inflation is going to affect interest rates a whole bunch. Inflation is how much the cost of things are increasing over time, increasing the cost of goods and services over time. It's the rate at which prices increase year by year. And really important calculation, our government goes out and measures this, measures a basket of consumer goods. What's in the basket of consumer goods?